In this review, I break down Donald Trump's radical economic agenda, his war on the global financial system, and his quiet campaign to seize control of the Federal Reserve.
The leading story dominating global headlines right now is, unsurprisingly, President Donald Trump and the extraordinary chaos, disruption, and economic turmoil he has unleashed across the world in just a matter of days. Political and financial elites everywhere are reeling. They're struggling to grasp what exactly Trump is doing, why he's seemingly sabotaging not just America's economy, but the economies of US, allies, trading partners, and the global financial system itself. What's the endgame? What could he possibly be hoping to gain? I believe I may have figured it out, or at least I have a working theory about Trump's true motivations. That's what we're going to explore today. I'll attempt to unpack what Trump is really after, how he plans to get there, and what costs he's apparently willing to accept along the way. And truthfully, the picture isn't pretty. In fact, I think Trump could spell real trouble for the world. But oddly enough, my theory also suggests that, despite the chaos, his actions might inadvertently benefit Ukraine. One case in point, oil prices. Let's take it from the top. Just last week, Trump abruptly raised tariffs on imports from nearly every country on Earth. With exceptions like Russia, North Korea, and Belarus, plus a few smaller players, Canada and Mexico were also excluded, though he slapped different tariffs on them separately. What Trump effectively did was detonate the post-World War II global economic order. He wrecked the foundation of modern free trade, the very structure that enabled decades of global prosperity. The free market system, arguably the most successful economic model in human history, helped lift billions out of poverty and drove immense progress in science, technology, and culture. Now Trump is tearing that system down, and the fallout is already evident. Markets across Asia, Europe, and the US have been plunging non-stop. Global stock losses have surpassed $10 trillion. That's not just a staggering number, it's incomprehensible, and it keeps climbing. This money hasn't simply changed hands, it's been annihilated. Imagine tossing $10 trillion into a furnace and watching it burn. That's what's happening, not over years, but in a single week. Trump's actions are hurting everyone, including those he never meant to harm. And that brings us to a strange twist. Trump may have accidentally dealt a devastating blow to his supposed ally, Vladimir Putin. Despite shielding Russia from his tariffs, Trump's global trade shockwaves have hit Russia's economy especially hard. The price of Urals crude, Russia's primary oil export, has tumbled to around $50 per barrel. That oil already trades at a discount compared to higher quality Western crude, and the Russian budget was pegged to $70 a barrel. Now they're $20 short and the decline isn't stopping. All signs point to even lower oil prices. For example, OPEC recently dropped its production quotas, meaning a flood of cheap, high-grade Middle Eastern oil is about to hit the market. That oil is better and cheaper than Russia's. It will likely push Russian oil out of key markets, depressing both prices and export volumes. A double hit, right where it hurts the most. Oil is Russia's economic lifeline. When oil prices fall, everything else unravels, from public services to military funding. In starting this trade war, Trump has essentially become a black swan for Putin, an unpredictable force that has wrecked Russia's 2025 budget strategy. The budget can no longer function as planned. So what now? The Kremlin may have to print more rubles or take on high-interest foreign loans just to cover salaries, fund government programs, and sustain military operations. Russia's military expenses are rising steadily, despite the war's intensity staying roughly the same. Why? Because it's all about money. Russia's war has turned into a mercenary operation. Patriotism is long gone. Recruitment ads focus purely on pay. Yesterday, soldiers signed up for 2 million rubles. Today, inflation means they want 3 million. But the money is drying up because oil is tanking. To retain factory workers, arms manufacturers must raise wages. To keep running, they must keep increasing prices for tanks, guns, and ammunition. The military-industrial complex needs constant cash flow, cash that's now in short supply. And then came this oil price crash, sudden and brutal, not as part of a deliberate attack, but as collateral damage from Trump's global trade war, a torpedo straight into Putin's flagship. Russia's main revenue stream is vanishing at the worst possible moment, and Trump didn't even mean to do it. Ironically, he may have intended to help. But the result is clear. Higher inflation, fewer imports, shrinking wages, falling production, and a general economic downturn in Russia. By late January and early February, industrial output was already sharply declining, and not even military production can escape the trend. It's entirely dependent on government funding, which is now under enormous pressure. It's a defining moment for Russia. Like a car running out of fuel, the economy will sputter to a halt without oil revenue. We've seen this before, in the early 1980s, when plunging oil prices helped drive the Soviet economy into collapse. That crisis led to shortages, inefficiencies, and ultimately the disintegration of the Soviet Union. At that time, Western sanctions were milder than today's, and the USSR was locked in a costly, fruitless war in Afghanistan. I remember the TV broadcasts vividly. The parallels are uncanny. Then it was a flock of black swans. Now it's one, bright red and just as destructive. It's too soon to declare the end of Putin's Russia, but we also can't ignore the warning signs. Falling oil prices and shrinking exports are the Kremlin's worst nightmare. There's little more dangerous to Russia's survival, and it reinforces my theory. Even when Trump doesn't intend to help Ukraine, he somehow does. And Russia just keeps losing ground courtesy of Trump. In my view, we're staring down an economic catastrophe. Leading economists agree. What Trump has done is both unprecedented and devastating. What's most alarming? This disaster wasn't an accident. It was set in motion by the very man who should be ensuring stability. Donald Trump? He sparked a global inferno, and now it's raging out of control. The facts speak for themselves. This blaze could consume everything, including Trump himself. And yet, the one who lit the match appears unconcerned. That's the world we live in now. No one can predict exactly how this ends, but fire rarely brings anything good. Last week, Trump and his team unleashed a barrage of letters, tariff threats, and ultimatums targeting imports from across the globe. It was the spark that ignited the flames. As I can see, he has a few goals. The first, make money off tariffs. Since the US imports massive volumes of cheap goods, Trump believes high duties could bring in big bucks, maybe $500 billion annually. Sounds impressive until you consider the US GDP, $22 trillion. That's less than 2.3% of the total economy. Not insignificant, but hardly transformational. Second, bring manufacturing back home. Trump wants Americans building everything again, but US labor is expensive. Some analysts estimate that if an iPhone were made entirely in the US, it would cost $20,000, not $1,500. That would crush demand and send inflation soaring. Still, Trump persists. He wants iPhones made by Americans, not workers earning $1 an hour in Asia. Alright, fine. Third, use trade as a weapon. Trump thinks tariffs can strong-arm other nations into submission. But here's the catch. These objectives don't work together. If you raise tariffs to bring manufacturing home, then imports dry up, meaning you collect no revenue from duties, so you lose your profits. And if you lean on tariffs to gain leverage over foreign countries, you can't push too hard. Go too far and they stop trading, your leverage disappears. These goals contradict each other. At best, you might achieve one or two temporarily, but all three? Impossible. You have to choose. Trump doesn't, or maybe he can't. Why? Because these aren't the real goals. I'll get to what I believe is the real goal in just a moment. Earlier, we saw how Trump's economic earthquake has rocked Russia. But what's his broader plan? Global experts are still debating. My view? Trump wants to dismantle the global economic order and replace it with one that puts him and his loyalists at the center. He wants to wipe out the liberal elite and install his own. To do that, the current system must fall. It has to burn, and from the ashes, Trump will try to build something new, something with his name on it. The crisis isn't collateral damage, it's the mission. Many still struggle to believe it. Trump's policies have damaged the US too. Why would he do that? Because in his mind, destruction is the path to power. By the way, I must say that Stephen Mirren has a number of unconventional ideas. Mirren, as a reminder, is Donald Trump's economic advisor One of his more radical proposals is to impose a fee on foreign holders of US debt securities, essentially charging countries for parking their money in US treasuries. The logic, perhaps, is that America provides a safe haven for global capital and should be compensated for that. But if such a policy were implemented, it would almost certainly trigger a collapse in trust in the US financial system. Investors count on the dollar's stability and the treasury market's predictability. Undermining that would be like cutting the heart out of the global economy. That's why, aside from Iran himself, no one else in Trump's circle has publicly supported such an idea. Still, Trump did take Iran's advice on other fronts: tariffs, currency realignment, and economic nationalism. Now, Trump seems fully committed to pushing forward with a full-scale economic reset. His goal? To completely restructure the global economic order, to enforce American control over world trade, preserve the dollar's reserve currency status, and reindustrialize the US economy, while simultaneously smashing the globalist neoliberal order and the elites who built it. Remember the fierce rhetoric from his vice president, J.D. Vance, at the Munich Security Conference in February? That wasn't just bluster, it was a preview of Trump's vision. Trump wants to break the current system, demolish its architecture, and replace it with something entirely his own. He wants to elevate his allies into a new ruling class, and in a sense, become a kind of omnipotent architect of a new world order. His world order. He wants to be remembered not just as a president, but as the greatest president in American and global history, a historical titan. But there's a problem. To implement such a vision, the rest of the world would need to not resist, and right now the world is doing the opposite. Nations aren't lining up to embrace Trump's authoritarian economic revolution. They're resisting, loudly and clearly. Why? Because to join Trump's new order, they would have to trust him, and that's a tall order. World leaders saw what happened in Trump's past dealings. Remember his meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office? Trump's behavior resembled that of a street-level racketeer more than a statesman, demanding gratitude and leverage under the cameras. It eroded trust. Trump doesn't carry himself like a statesman or an aristocrat, he acts like a boss, a mafia boss. And that creates fear, not allegiance. So who would join him? Perhaps Viktor Orban might sign on. But Vladimir Putin? Unlikely. Putin wouldn't want to play second fiddle. And as for the American establishment, they are not ready to wrap themselves in burial shrouds just yet. They still want to rule, and they still have something to lose, trillions in assets, power, and influence. Even many of Trump's former supporters in the billionaire class, Elon Musk included, are now backing away. They've realized that if Trump succeeds, their empires may fall, their fortunes may vanish. So they're resisting, but it may be too late. As the saying goes, they've already loaded the gun, and now they must face the consequences of arming Trump. Across America, protests are building, and unrest is likely to escalate as the economy weakens. Trump, knowing this, is launching a preemptive strike, not just against Democrats or globalists, but against the American financial elite itself. How? By triggering a global sell-off, an intentional collapse of stock markets that has already wiped out $10 trillion in value in a matter of days. That's not just chaos, it's strategy. Trump wants the rich focused on saving their own fortunes, not organizing resistance. He wants the power brokers distracted, weakened, and sidelined. It's reminiscent of what Putin did in Russia during the early 2000s, crushing the oligarchs, imprisoning or exiling dissenters, and converting a defiant elite into loyal servants. It worked for Putin, and Trump may be taking notes. Once he crushes the financial elite, Trump's next target will likely be the Federal Reserve, the true brain and heart of the Western financial system. Despite being a private institution, the Fed controls the global supply of dollars, sets interest rates, and holds immense influence, perhaps more than the US president himself. And Trump can't tolerate that. He has already begun his assault, publicly criticizing Fed Chair Jerome Powell and demanding rate cuts to juice the economy. This is only the beginning. Trump can't fire Powell outright, not yet, but he's positioning loyalists throughout Washington, dismantling independent agencies and replacing career economists with loyal operatives. The Fed isn't just a future target, it's the ultimate one. The endgame? Trump wants to strip the Federal Reserve of its independence, bend its policies to his will, and make the dollar serve his agenda, not Wall Street's, not the global elites. If successful, it would mark a radical shift, not just in American governance, but in the global economic system. A new world would begin, not shaped by consensus, but by decree. And at the center of it all would be one man, Donald Trump. Every day, Ukraine's land remains deadly, littered with landmines and unexploded ordnance. Innocent civilians, farmers, and rescue workers face unimaginable risks. The war will one day end, but the danger will persist for decades. That's why we need your help.
Meet a remotely controlled demining machine called ZMI, made in Ukraine.
Designed for speed, precision, and safety, it is capable of clearing hazardous areas efficiently while keeping human lives out of harm's way. It is affordable and effective, costs up to 80 times less than foreign demining machines, clears up to 1.8 hectares per day, operates in sand, mud, trenches, and rocky terrain, certified under NATO standards. This is what makes this demining machine truly remarkable. It can withstand the detonation of an anti-tank mine and keep going. In comparison, traditional demining vehicles suffer catastrophic damage from such blasts. The machine is not only durable but also has low-cost maintenance. It survives anti-tank mine detonations, and repair costs are as low as $700 compared to over $50,000 for traditional demining vehicles. Join International Action Alliance in this mission. Your donation can help fund this demining machine and other vital land rehabilitation initiatives. Together, we can clear the land, save lives, and rebuild Ukraine's future.